As I've gotten older, I realize that there's actually disenfranchisement in being a celebrity, right? Like, I think about people who have kind of had resources, right, in order to get to where they are. The people that are coming to mind to me are Yara Sahidi and LeBron James' son. I think it's Bronny James, right? And the work that you do is in so many ways seen as less meaningful and it's less impactful. And it's not to say that you don't reap the rewards of your hard work and that your work is not acknowledged and people don't like you or whatever, but there's really something in that. There's really something in being a celebrity and then going out in the world and doing things. And I think this is also why Amanda Seales was never really received. Because in many ways, Amanda's growth and, kind of like her celebrity status, you know what I mean? Her celebrity status, I think that might have been what disconnected her from the people, although if you look at Amanda's work, right, like she's for the people, although she's had some moments, but anyway, not to get too far into her work per se, but when you look at Amanda Seales and her inability to connect with the people, despite how hard she has been on the front lines of advocacy and educating communities, you kind of have to kind of look at that glass box and that factor of celebrity. It's the same thing with Kanye West, right? Kanye West was doing what could have been considered something that was a bit revolutionary, but that box of celebrity, right? And with Kanye West, it's a little bit more particular. I mean, I can't, that situation in itself was very interesting because, although he was seeking to empower the general public, I mean, the ways in which he kind of went about going, and doing that, like, I don't think he was on CNN, but going on some of the more prominent talk shows and, just that barrier that really closes the gap between the have and the have-nots and those resources that you're kind of able to play with and kind of funnel yourself into, that is the huge disconnect, right? Like that's the disconnect. And I use Yara as an example because I believe that Yara is also someone who's incredibly talented. She talks about how her uncle is Nas. And I think that Yara's work is incredibly impactful, even the representation. Like she's just brilliant. Like she really is. I used to watch her on Grownish. And then I think was it Grownish? Is that the one with the college and everything? Yeah, I used to watch her on Grownish and I just absolutely was enamored, right? Incredibly beautiful, incredibly smart, artistic, creative, just amazing, But when I look at some of Yara's work and Yara trying to go out in the world and kind of make this impact, it's not to say that it's not working. I think if you want to kind of calculate what's working and what isn't working based on numbers, and you can very easily say like, okay, yeah, this is working. You know what I mean? Like this is a success. But I'm talking about the way in which the work of advocacy from celebrities just doesn't really resonate. And I think it is because of this barrier of celebrity. And so I think in all the ways we like to look at the general public, we like to assess and we like to critique those who are impoverished and so forth. We have advantages that celebrities don't have. And I believe that is quite literally the cost of admission. You can kind of see this with Colin Kaepernick. It was very evident that Colin wanted to be on the ground level. Colin's documentary that was on Netflix talked about how he grew up, he was adopted, talks about some of the experiences that he had growing up with a white mother, white dad, and what was very evident to me was that Colin wanted to be on the ground level. Colin seemed to have been a little bit more in tune with reality, right? He didn't seem to grow up in the world of celebrity. And we also have to take into consideration that Colin is an athlete. So, you know that being an athlete is years of hard work before it's glamorized and, all of those things with the media. But you could very easily tell that Colin wanted to be on the front lines. And I think what he was willing to give up, wasn't just a token for our advocacy. It wasn't just to say, hey, like, I just want to I want to advocate for, like, I want to advocate for people in marginalized communities and Black people and so forth. But I think it was more so like, I don't want to say a call for help, because I just think that sounds a little too dramatic. But I feel like he was aware of what he was risking, and to him, that was worth it. And I believe that this is the kind of hidden cost of like influencer and celebrity that we don't really talk about. It's very knee deep and kind of nitty gritty. And when I say that, please know we're not verging on the verge of celebrity here, but we're more so just talking about the cost, right? We're more so just weighing the cost. Simply put, we could talk about being in a glass box. We could talk about, being monitored and what you do and what you say, and how you have teams and things like that you have to answer to. I remember watching Girlfriends, and she was dating this guy. Joan was dating this guy. I can't remember if he was an author. I don't know what he was, but she was dating this guy who was kind of like a celebrity. And when they would go out, she wanted to kind of just hang out at the farmer's market, and there were all these people taking photos with him. And outside of just the superficialities of like paparazzi and that being more of a minuscule aspect of celebrity that we all understand that comes with the territory, he started to speak about how he doesn't get to do whatever he wants in the ways in which Joan does, right? He doesn't have those same liberties. And I guess, generally speaking, we're all aware of this, right? We're all aware that, it costs to be the boss, quote unquote. But in this case, we're all aware that, when you build a representation, right? Like, this is just me speaking in good faith. Okay. I'm speaking in good faith right now. You build a representation, you have certain demands, certain choices that you just don't make because you've built that thing, But if I'm not speaking in terms of like, not necessarily good faith, but more so just speaking, because when I say good faith, what I try not to do is double down on celebrities so much, because I personally feel like to become a celebrity, to be someone who lives a more exceptional lifestyle, one, when you talk about materially, resource-wise, like, of course, I think most people would actually choose that versus being impoverished. Okay, like, that's just a no-brainer. But then secondly, I think it's very easy to kind of get, I don't want to say inundated, and I definitely don't want to say abducted, but it's very easy to be introduced into the world of celebrity and to find yourself in this space, right? Like, outside of nepotism, you could very easly start something, and it grows and it becomes something, and there's really nothing wrong with that. And I don't know. I don't think that anybody there are some people today who are like just bloodthirsty and are like, I want to be a celebrity, but I don't think that anyone, well, let me not say anyone, because I actually think that the latter is a little bit more common. But what I'm going to say, or the former rather, is a little bit more common than what I'm getting ready to say, which would be the latter. I do think that a lot of people who become celebrities don't always kind of intend on it being that way, And I think with Colin Kaepernick and his Black resistance, I do think that was a bit of a resistance to say, hey, you're not going to control me. I don't want to be this person in this glass box, But for a lot of people, I think people start out and they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. You know what I mean? Like, when you think about it, influencer culture, American society at its core really thrives on youth, right? It thrives on youth. It thrives on, it plays on young people, right? You've got the vitality. You don't really know anything. You're kind of naive. You're as young as you're ever going to be. You're beautiful. You're all these different things. And so I think it really preys on that. It preys on youth, American society. Even when you take football, right? For all the NFL players and the athletes who have gone off to do incredible things, there are a lot of people who have had some very horrible things happen to them in this pursuit and this endeavor. The things like, CTE most commonly, but even other, not necessarily just neurological disorders, but a lot of other ugly things, that are not put in front of the media, that you don't really know exist, but they do exist, and they're a lot more common. And it's not even just in terms of like professional football players, right? That's like every field. You have athletes who eventually decide that, hey, I'm actually gonna decide to be a teacher or something like that, and their stories and their experiences go unheard. And it's because they had grown aware to what was at cost. They had grown aware to the price that they were getting ready to pay for celebrityism. And I'm not speaking in terms of conspiracy. I'm speaking in terms of the sacrifice, the very real sacrifice. I remember being I was like 24. I was like 23, 24. And I just remember really being at a bit of a crossroads. I felt like I had some opportunities in my life to do certain things, and I'm not going to sit here and gas myself up, right? What I'm not going to do, I'm not going to fabricate stories. I'm not going to sit here and talk myself up and make it something that it's not, because I don't really want to get on the verge of that. Because here's the reality. Let me give you this introduction before we even get into this, right? What I'm getting ready to say. None of us really knows, right? Like, none of us really knows what opportunities are ahead of us, or what's really in front of us, or what's really possible. You know what I mean? So let's just keep that in mind as I'm getting ready to say what I'm going to say. All right, let's have a sense of grounding here, okay? But I did feel as though I had certain opportunities to do certain things. And I remember seriously like weighing the cost. Now, if you know me, I'm a believer. I believe that was nothing more than my faith, and that was my relationship with God and my discernment in many ways. But excuse me. I remember weighing the cost, and I just remember being like, is this going to be the best thing for you in the long run? Because the thing about branding, and what was so evident to me, is that when you brand yourself as something, it's kind of hard to rebrand. It's not impossible. You can do it. But consistency and longevity of a thing is a consistent brand. And once you put something out there as, this is who I am, it's kind of challenging to kind of come back from that. And so I feel like that's probably one of the more predatory things about why we prey on youth, because if you can't see past, this moment in your life, right? Like, you have to understand, like, at 23, you're not going to be the same at 28, and it's only a 4-year difference, but it's true. The things that you wanted at 22 are not the things you want at 25, are not the things you want at 27, And so it's like, if you can kind of lock people into a certain type of thing very young, then it makes it incredibly difficult to kind of break out of that thing. And I think this is also why you have arrested development. And it's not just in terms of a lack of resources. Sometimes it's in terms of, kind of being put in, this realm of exceptionalism. So, yeah, man, you have to really, essentially what I'm saying is you have to really weigh the cost. I spoke about this. I don't know if I'm going to publish this on Substack or on Medium, but I just kind of spoke about, where we are right now with cheating being more prevalent. Although there was a whole show called Cheaters, we know that people, men and women, have been leaving their families for years. This is not just anything new per se, but we do have to kind of address the cultural prevalence of it today. And I'm willing to, I'm listening to the rebuttals. Okay. I'm willing to hear people refute the idea that it's just social media, and, it's not anything that's really prevalent. It's just that we have the media, and the media is, those arguments are very valid. Okay. But to me, with social media proxy, I feel like more people are willing to take a gamble on exceptionalism because it's in your face every day. I don't think we realize this, but like, if you don't be mindful of what you are consuming, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't have any sense of grounding, I mean, I can't fathom it because, I'm a reader and, so forth. But if you are not someone who is like literally grounded in your life, in reality, you are certainly going to find yourself in your brain being programmed, okay, for exceptionalism. And you are going to be a part of that majority that is very intolerant to reality. I gave the example of how, working in a restaurant, as a young adult, that does not fuel exceptionalism, right? Like in your mind, you're like, this does not fuel exceptionalism. And it's really hard today to kind of carve a path of your own. It's really hard today to, just kind of be in tune with your reality and create a life that aligns with your values. America is quite literally shoving these values down your throat. And if you're not mindful, you will truly be suffocated, and you will get on a path and on a road that is not for you, and you will be paying that cost. So I don't know. This isn't really to scare. I guess it's more so just to kind of bring a sense of awareness to the disenfranchisement of celebrity. I know we think that this is the most privileged position to be in the world. Quite literally is what we think. But it's not. It's not. It comes at a cost. And I think it's easier to pay that admission, to pay that fee when you don't really know who you are and you don't have that foundation anyway, because you're like, what do I have to lose? But when you really know who you are, you know your values, you know what makes you happy, you know what you're good at, you're willing to work that thing, you know what brings you a sense of peace, you know what allows you to go to bed at night and put your head on the pillow, and you're not tormented by what you did and didn't do, and and so forth, you will have a much better outcome. And I think you should just, as Babyface said, go do that, versus trying to pursue exceptionalism, because I just don't think that people are counting the cost today. And it's incredibly difficult. And I think that this is exactly the reason why we have the increase, or rather the influx, in mental health crises, because of isolation, because our realities are way too, I don't want to say disgruntled, but our realities are way too far from this exceptionalism, right? Our job, our partners, the car we drive, the way we look, you know what I mean? That is so far from anything that is considered exceptional in today's society. Our bank accounts, you know what I mean? Like that's so I just think that it's easy to kind of just check out. And I realized that, I'm going to go ahead and close, but I realized that we were all on a one-way ticket to nowhere. So things are going to get worse. I'm not really sure what that shift will be. I think the reality is that we will no longer be able to document as things get worse. Algorithmically, it's so divisive. It's kind of hard to see what is going on over here and what is going on over there. But I do believe that things are definitely going to get worse. But we may not be able to document those things. We are going to probably have, more and more cultural significant moments, where we can kind of say, hey, this is concrete evidence that things are getting worse, and that being isolated and being conditioned and walking around with this paradigm of like exceptionalism is changing the ways in which we socialize. And, we may be able to name certain characteristics like envy or, whatever, which, in turn is going to eventually become incredibly dangerous. I spoke about this. I'm going to publish it on Substack, or I'll probably put it on Substack, but the rise in crime, right? And crime no longer necessarily being gun violence, but crime being scams, crime being theft and robbery. And so what happens when you put people in a room and they're isolated and all they have is the pedestalization of exceptionalism, and their reality is so far from that exceptionalism, and there's not really any sound or concrete advice, because of course exceptionalism means that it's not something that's readily available or available to everyone, right? It's exceptional. That means that that's like the exception to the rule. So the rule is the 99, right? And so when you have people who are just in their homes and they're to themselves and are inundated with this exceptionalism, you have increasing insecurity, right? I think this is also kind of why when you talk about mental health crises, I don't always think that the crises is going to show up, especially today. It's not going to consistently show up as depression. it's not going to consistently show up as anxiety. I believe that it's going to start to show up as disillusionment. And, the reason why I was really honing in on the awareness around Jordan Neely, right? The black young man who was murdered by Daniel Penny in New York City on the subway, was because Jordan Neely's situation spoke to me in a way that it was almost like a wake up call. Because to me, this is where we're headed in modern day society, right? Disillusionment will eventually lead to some levels of paranoia, i.e. schizophrenia, okay? You couple that with drug use. You couple that with a lack of socialization, okay? You couple that with the innate needs of mammals, of humans, Homo sapiens. It's going to get pretty bad, okay? And what, because our government is the cause and the cure, what they decided to do was say, hey, we're going to give you robots. We're going to give you VR. You know what I mean? That's our solution of kind of numbing this. But this is actually going to get pretty bad. Now, of course, we could be optimistic and we don't have to kind of go down this rabbit hole of dread. And I'm still optimistic for my life. But I do think generally we are going to see this a bit more common. So with Jordan Neely, it was kind of like, let's open our eyes here because Jordan's not going to be the first or the last, right? If schizophrenia is a thing that can ultimately lead to your death, right? And so Vice, I shared this in the community post on YouTube. Vice has actually talked about how jails were replacing asylums, right? We know that, mass incarceration did its big one. Okay. That swept a lot of people, but we also know that I don't want to say there's been prison reform. Okay. But we know that things are changing. I don't think that I don't really know if incarceration is going down. Cause someone comment below and let me know if incarceration is coming down. I didn't come on this pod with any facts or anything like that, but I wonder, is it decreasing? Because what would people be being incarcerated for? In large numbers, right? Like mass incarceration was able to do what it did because it was mass incarceration. You know what I mean? But now, those who are being incarcerated are the unhoused, right? And we know if you don't have certain physiological needs met, you're not going to be stable psychologically. And so if people are disillusioned and they're checking out from their realities and they're saying, you know what, I'm actually not going to go work at this fast food restaurant, even though I need this money to pay my bills. I need this money to take care of myself. I need, and it's not just fast food restaurants and it's not just menial labor. If people are saying, I'm no longer willing to do the hard work that is required for my reality because I'm going to take a chance on exceptionalism. I'm going to be an influencer. And it's not to mock anybody who wants to be an influencer or create content. I'm just saying, when you have this widespread thing, right? I look at myself all the time and I say, I never wanted this. As a young girl, this was not on my vision board. I never said I want to be a content creator. I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be a beauty enthusiast. I said I want to be a writer. That's what I said. And I've stayed true to that. And I stay in my lane, man. I stay in my lane, and it's not to say that I can't. Quite frankly, I think that with such low barriers to entry, we think that things are a little bit more easier than they are, right? Like, you don't understand that trying to be an influencer takes a lot more work than people would like to give it credit for. Sometimes people will come out and they'll share how being an influencer is incredibly difficult and it's, it's all these different things. But I mean, in general, it is pretty skillful labor. You have to be someone who's kind of good with digital marketing and the back end things like SEO and editing and all these different things. And people don't really like to talk about that. Are you willing to invest that $2,500 into that course to learn digital marketing and media and so forth? It's a lot. I think it's a lot more difficult than people like to make it seem, but anyway, disillusionment is going to eventually distort our realities. Okay. Do I think we're going to be in a dystopia? No, because you have people like me, you have people like you, people who are very sound in mind. We always will be in cohort with our older generations. Okay. Shout out to the sound generations. Okay. So I don't think it's going to be giving crazy town, but I do think we can start to see this disillusionment and this paranoia manifest in a lot of different ways psychologically. And that is going to be incredibly dangerous for community and even to ourselves, you know. And so the thing about that, too, is if you engage with something long enough, you become it, you know. That kind of becomes your operating your operating force, you know. So it's just something to think about. It's just something to think about. When I realized that this is what it is, right? You meet people, you meet young guys, you meet young women or whatever, and you almost have to turn the switch off, you know, of the disillusionment. You know, you have to tell them, hey, it's okay if you don't have $1 million. It's okay if you know what I mean? But it's really bad. It's really, really bad. I don't think that many people have that safe space to be able to turn that switch off. And then I think when they do enter into that safe space, the level of self-hatred, right? All the things that are underneath the surface, all the things that fuel this desire, right? And this pursuit of exceptionalism come to the forefront, and they're not even able to engage with reality, right? They're not even able to engage in healthy community in these kind of like safe spaces where they're able to be seen for who they are, and they're accepted for who they are, and their realities are accepted for, you know, for what it is. They're not able to engage in a healthy way, you know? And because that's when the truth comes out, you know, that's when all the things that they've, you know, that's when the ugly stuff starts to surface and rear its head, and they don't know what to do with that because those are the things that have been suppressed. So I'm going to go ahead and close now. I hope you guys got something from this podcast episode. Just my morning thoughts. Peace.